a stupid hope that it would never change. I won't accept that this is how it ends. This can't be how I leave things. Another dream created, another night I won't forget, another girl I let down, another new best friend, there can't be more.
Welcome to My Comic Shop History. I'm your host, Anthony Desiato. My Comic Shop History is a 10-episode podcast event that chronicles the rise and fall of New York comic book store alternate realities. Each week, I will be speaking to past and present owners, customers, and employees about our experiences at the store. Last week, I chatted with Alternate Reality's owner and founder, Steve Odo, about his unlikely journey and decision to close the store after 23 years. This week, I am joined by two guests. Across from me is customer-turned-employee Sean McInerney. Sean still finds time to work the occasional Saturday at the store, despite being a full-time school psychologist, husband, and father. During my tenure as an AR worker, I spent more time behind the counter with Sean than with anyone else. Tonight, we're revealing our pet peeves and telling our best stories. To my right is Mike Capolino, a.k.a. number 122, a longtime regular customer. Given that much of our first episode involved Steve bashing his customers, I thought it would be fitting to hear from a member of that group and get his perspective. Gentlemen, welcome.
Hi, thank you.
Hey, what's up, guys? Great to be here.
So the title of this episode is the 3-minute rule. I think we need to just jump right in. And Sean, what is the 3-minute rule?
I will give you 3 minutes of my undivided attention, and after that, I've completely checked out. And then it becomes a challenge to see how long it takes the customer to realize that my eyes are no longer connected with theirs, that I am now reading a comic, or I've moved on to another customer before they get the hint, okay, now it's time to maybe stop asking which female superhero has a bigger bra size. Do you know what I mean? Something like that, just to cut the nonsense off.
What do you mean, you guys? Comic book fans? We ask silly questions?
And we're at 3 minutes for Mike. So.
Now, I have to say, Mike would never fall into that category.
Absolutely not. No, and it's not for every customer. That's true. That's true. It's not a blanket 3-minute rule, because part of the beauty of the store is the relationships that you do form with the customers. But you do get some interesting characters that come in that not only make you as an employee uncomfortable, but can make other people in the store uncomfortable. And some of what they want to talk about not always appropriate for the kids that might be in the store and stuff like that. And so you have to. The 3-minute rule is really meant for the greater alternate audience.
Have you ever found that the issue you encountered was that the person who you were talking to didn't necessarily want to hear what you thought, but more just wanted to share what they thought?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I think the beauty of alternate realities, and really any comic book store, is it brings in very quirky and eclectic people, but they all share a similar passion, which is wonderful. However, they don't always have the opportunity to share that passion with other people, so they just come in and figure, okay, well, these guys like what I like, so I'm just going to talk about what I like and get it all off my chest because they're here and they're being paid to stay here, so they can't leave me. So absolutely, I think it is an opportunity for them to get to say what they want to say.
This store, you guys should know, is unique compared to some other comic stores in that context. I've had a lot more long conversations. I mean, not just with you gentlemen and with the guys who work here and people who I've become friends with, but randoms where there was give and take, and there definitely was back and forth, compared to some other places I've been to where it's like every conversation is just someone trying to Tommy Topper each other, just trying to be like, oh, I know more than you about, obscure character X, Y, and Z.
What is the worst thing that you've done to disengage with a customer?
Oh, is this do you want me to tell the spanking story? Is that what you're leading for? Are you fishing for that story?
I actually wasn't fishing for that story. I figured we would get to that later, but I think we might as well get into it now.
Some of the things I've done, simply reading a comic or looking down at the computer screen, looking up towards the TV, looking at the other customers in the store, engaging in a conversation with another customer in the store, or returning to a conversation that we were in the midst of to stop to help the customer, which is totally appropriate. And I don't want to sound at all like we were ever off-putting. I don't think we were ever off-putting to the customer. You're a customer.
Not that I ever saw. I mean, and please do not filter, you guys are my buds. I mean, I don't think of you guys as like, the store clerks that I came to see. So
Well, and that's the
please
beauty-
feel free to talk. I mean, I hope I'm not considered, I think my presence here means I'm not a regular customer,
By no means do I consider you the customer, No, but you are representative of
Yeah.
of some of the customers. But you're a great representation of how the customers become more than just people that come in
Yeah.
and buy stuff. They become a part of your life. They become friends and buds, and you can shoot the shit with them.
Yeah.
But the 3-minute rule does not apply for those customers, or does it? But no, it does not apply for those customers.
At times. I've been known to rant periodically, so
Well, to echo what Sean said, yeah, I mean, I agree. I definitely don't consider you a quote-unquote regular customer. And the fact that you're here recording this podcast episode with us is testament to that. And I mean, I have to say, in general, despite whatever pet peeves we may have and what pet peeves we'll discuss on this podcast, I mean, on the whole, I consider the customers to be a great group of people. The diversity that comes through the store, I think, is impressive. Mostly men, mostly adults, but in terms of backgrounds and interests and occupations, you get a whole cross-section. And I think interacting with, that variety of people, I always found that to be very, very valuable, especially for someone who, used to be on the shy side.
And I completely agree with you. And part of the reason I've stayed at the store for so long, despite having a full-time job and a family and outside commitments elsewhere, is due largely because of the customers that you do connect with, and you get these different perspectives because they all have different fields that they work in. They've all generationally they're different, but they all have the same common passion.
Sean, you actually have one up on me in that this is not the only comic book store you've ever worked for.
True.
So I want to get a little bit into your comic shop history. Prior to working at Alternate Realities, where did you work?
Yeah, so my comic shop history started, I got a job my senior year of high school working at One If by Cards, Two If by Comics. It's now American Legends.
Mm-hmm.
Also located on Central Avenue, probably about a mile from this store here. Much more a sports store than a comic book store. But at the time, they did deal with more comics, and they offered me a job. I had been shopping there for a little bit, mainly because my mom would drop me off so I can go shopping while she would run, to the bookstore with my sister or run errands on Central and then come back and scoop me up again. So I started working there. I worked there for a year. And then when I graduated high school, I came to the store here because I had heard that they were having a huge sale. And I remember going around and at that time begging for whatever money I could get from grandparents, aunts, uncles, godparents, anybody, because I said, "Oh my, dollar bin sale! This is amazing! I got to take full advantage of it." And saw the store and saw the clutter, but saw the fun in the hunt of going through these boxes and finding the hidden gems, and fell in love with it and became a customer here as soon as I graduated high school and quit my other job. And then not long after being a customer, I got in talking with Steve and became close with Steve, and close enough where I had said, Steve, I'm home from college, or it's over the summer. I don't even remember how it all started, but I just started showing up on Wednesdays before the store opened. And he would let me in, and I just started helping unpack books, and never for money, never with the expectation of getting paid or thinking that I was a customer. More for my own selfish, I wish I could have the books 2 hours sooner. So if I show up and help you put them out, can I at least buy them and be on my way? And ultimately, what started happening ever so slowly was Steve's father, Harry Odo, would come in on Wednesdays as well to help with the breakdown, and Harry started buying us lunch. He started buying me lunch. And it became like a weekly routine in the time I wasn't away at college. And all of a sudden, Steve one day was like, "Hey, here's your money for today." I said, "What, really?" And then he was like, "Yeah, you're working now. You're an employee of the store." And eventually it led to me getting keys and led to me spending an entire one summer working 4 or 5 days a week with Anthony, with Tom, with Steve. And then I stayed on through college, through my master's, through the birth of my first son, through my doctorate, through the birth of my second son. And I don't even know exactly what my start date was, but it's got to be over 10, 11, 12 years, somewhere around that time.
Well, they say that most of life is just showing up, and I think you've proven that. By the way, you volunteered your way into a job here. I've often told the story of how I got my job here. I was a customer. I was in high school, and I was in here picking up my new comics on Wednesday, and Steve said to me, "Hey kid, how's your alphabet?" And that was his way of asking me if I wanted to spend the summer alphabetizing back issues.
What a pickup line.
Yeah. And the rest is history. I don't remember our first interaction. I don't remember when we met, but I do remember, Sean, I was probably working here during high school organizing back issues, and you would come in like a force of nature. I mean, you came in, no joke. You would come in and just make a beeline straight for those back issue bins and just tear through them. I mean, you were on a mission, clearly.
But not nicely. I was very, very meticulous with the books. But I did. Part of what I love about the store is that there's so many boxes of comics all over the place, and there really are hidden gems throughout the store. And Steve always tells a story about how they found the first appearance of Deadpool in the dollar bin or something, and I've never lived it down because I didn't pull out New Mutants whatever '98. But that was one of the fun things, and it still is one of the best parts of working at the store. Is every now and then I'll dig through a box and we'll say, "Oh my gosh, who knew that we even had this?"
Yeah, you bring up something. I mean, that reminds me of how I started coming here because it was the thrill of the hunt. I was a regular at a comic store in White Plains, in Comic Book Heaven, and that place was nice. It had some good qualities about it. Nice, I don't know if it's the right term, but some good qualities about it. Let's just leave it at that.
Comic Book Heaven is actually where I got most of the Spider-Man clone saga.
Yeah.
It's where I got most of my Green Arrow series. They had an amazing back issue
They
selection.
had an incredible back. They had almost a year's worth of books, because they would buy, especially all the Marvel and DC, that they would buy so much excess. They had like a year's worth. Yeah, when I got back into comics, I was out of comics for about 10 years, 8 years, between college and travel. I was traveling around America. I was a really big Deadhead Fish fan, so I was doing a lot of touring with music, and I'd gotten out of comics, not completely, but I wasn't Wednesdays at all. I was just whatever I would pop in. And then I moved back home after school, and I started working at Borders, and Borders had a pretty robust graphic novel section, and I started flipping through and being like, "Oh, hey, I know that guy." Led me to a comic book store, the Comic Book Heaven, and it got me. I mean, within like a month, I was caught back up with everything that was going on in the Marvel Universe. That was the Heroes Reborn whole thing. Totally jazzed me up. I was, the Avengers had just started again with Perez and Busiek. So anyway, that was my store for a while. And I was working at Borders, like I just said. So it was retail, and I was working all different hours. I was working 40 hours, but it would be 3 to 12, different times a day. So I would have some days that I was free, and I would just go on the hunt in Westchester. I started Comic Book Heaven. Hey, I know I was just here the other day, but I'm just looking around. Then I would come down here, and I'd drive around, and I actually found one of my comics first. So I wonder if I ever saw you there back in the day. This is going.
I had more hair then, so it didn't look the same.
I certainly wasn't a regular, but then I found here. I would come here, and this started to be where I would spend more and more of the hunt. Not even necessarily buying more and more, but like it's become clear from, both you guys know from my time when you guys worked more regularly. I would just start staying, talking, looking around, looking at something, and I don't even remember when the transition came where I decided that I was going to have my pull list here instead of at Comic Book Heaven. But because this is not more convenient, it's way more convenient for me to be in White Plains. But it was the hunt that got me here. There was a period where I was like jealous, like, oh, those guys, they get to find the stuff. They're in there all day. They get to see the good stuff. Then I got to know everyone a little bit better, and I realized that you're not always searching for the good stuff. But
No, we always are. In fact, if only you knew how much stuff was in here that you never even saw. It's not.
I mean, I have to say, one of the best things about working here was definitely, getting our hands on everything first. Being here when that delivery would arrive, and we'd be the first ones to pick through those books and find the perfect copy. was definitely always cool. But that actually brings up something that I wanted to ask you. Was there ever anything that you were curious about behind the scenes of alternate realities?
No. Actually, honestly, you guys, it's weird. I've always been. I feel like I've been a little bit more of an insider at times. Has Steven did he ever have to throw people out? Like, I know that there used to be the gaming here that he would have to kind of get people out, but that was different because they were friends and family, if you will. So it's being like, all right, guys, I love you all, but get the fuck out is, kind of what you do. But did he ever have to, like, throw customers out? Were there ever, like, a lot in here at the end of the store?
Sean and I haven't exchanged any words, but I think we're both thinking of the Rough Lover story.
Absolutely, the Rough Lover story, yes.
Okay. This was the summer of 2007, I believe. And I think this was the summer that you and I spent a lot of time working here. It was an interesting time in the store. In my opinion, and I would stand by this, I think it was the last time that Steve was really enthusiastic and passionate about the store. He had Sean and myself working here at least 3 full days a week, if not more. And it was the last time that the store was really neat and tidy and organized because we just stayed on top of it so much. That was also the summer that Steve had shirts made with the store logo and the website on the back, and he gave them out to the customers as a thank you and also as a promotional tool. Mm-hmm. It was also during that summer that he decided to update the website, and to do that he hired a young lady who had recently graduated from a nearby local school. She was of legal age, but barely, and she spent some time working here, mostly on the website. She'd also be behind the register as well, and she quickly became the object of affection for one of our customers, who was older, not vastly older, but older by a good bit.
Old as shit compared to how old she was, but yes, much older, much older than she was, to the point where I'm expecting to catch a predator to come knocking on the door. But yeah, no. So we had this customer who did really become infatuated with her, and she shared the attraction, and the two of them began a relationship in the store.
Yes. So not long after that, Steve made his disapproval known to the girl, that he didn't think it was a good idea for her to be associating with this older customer. So not long after that, Rough Lover came into the store and confronted Steve. It was a Wednesday, I believe, and the store was very crowded with us employees and other customers and friends of the store, so there were a lot of people around. And this guy comes up to Steve and says, "I should kick your teeth in."
Amazingly, the balls it would take to come into this guy's place of business surrounded by 2 employees and all of these customers that are friends of Steve's that would all jump at the opportunity to protect Steve and stand behind Steve. And here's this guy threatening him. And Steve, to his credit, actually handled it pretty well for Steve, I think.
I would agree. I mean, much has been said about Steve's desire to avoid confrontation, but this was one case where he didn't back down, certainly, and maybe in part because he was bolstered by all of the people who were around him. But there were 2 pieces of the exchange that stand out the most. I'll take one. You could take the other one. The first was Rough Lover says to Steve, "Well, what do you think? I'm just banging her?" And Steve goes, "Well, are you?" "Are you banging her?" So that's become a sort of a classic, often quoted line within AR lore. And then,
and correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe he then follows with, "You don't know anything about me. You don't know if I'm gentle or if I'm a rough lover. You have no idea." Is that how it went down?
Yeah, that's how it went down. And at that point, we're all sort of thinking, well, if we didn't know you were a rough lover before, we kind of know now.
And, of course, that name stuck because Rough Lover has been in the lore of AR history ever since 2007.
So this talk of Rough Lover actually brings me to my next point, the nicknames. Now, in general, I think it's fair to say that Steve and you and I, got to know many customers by name, or at least by customer reserve number, right? But there were many customers who we either knew only by a nickname that we gave them, or even if we knew their real name, we chose to go by their nickname instead. Very few, if any, customers, I think, actually know of their nicknames. So what are some of your favorites?
Pick a couple of the folks that I might just not, don't have to tell me who they are, just so I can try and guess them, in my head.
One of them, and I actually consider him to be a friend of mine, but I'm gonna poke fun at him anyway. Andy SOM. Andy SOM stands for Andy School of Management, I believe, right?
Yes.
But Andy SOM amongst us at the store, at least Anthony and I, stood for Andy Sadomasochist. And if you ever met the guy, you'd look at him and be like, yeah, I could kind of see that maybe. But he's a really nice guy. And he knows that his nickname is Andy SOM because he knows that he went to the School of Management. Mm-hmm. But he doesn't realize what our nickname behind the scenes is for him. There's also Evil Rich Roney, who doesn't realize that we call him Evil Rich Roney. Rich Roney being, again, a very close friend of the store, very passionate about comics and Silver Age stuff and the history of comics and art and writers and everything. And then you've got the evil Rich Roney, who is, I guess, an artist in his profession, insists on getting the employee discount, has a passion for stuff, certainly, but doesn't have the same way of conveying his opinions in a nice and friendly and complimentary type way. So he became Evil Rich Roney because he's the antithesis. And I think because the two of them squared off at one point. But
yes. Yes, there was a disagreement over the artist Don Heck. But yeah, those two are definitely great. And trying to think of some of my favorites. One is definitely Nickelback. And I can share that one because he knows, I don't know if he knows that we call him that, but he at least knows that we consider him to bear a very strong resemblance to the lead singer of Nickelback. And he's a great guy and a friend, but that's one. Red Hulk is another one. I think it's not too bad, but so Red Hulk is a customer of ours who, he's red. I don't know if he's been out in the sun working or there's just this anger. I don't know what exactly it is, but he comes in and he's a solid, stocky guy. He's not someone you really want to mess with, but he just always looks angry and, just sort of the complexion again, whether he's been out in the sun or he's worked up about something. Red Hulk just seemed like an appropriate name.
Absolutely.
I really hope he is out in the sun because just to be worked up all the time and just be red-faced is not a fun way to be.
Wallet Boy.
Oh, my God, I forgot about Wallet Boy.
Whatever happened to Wallet Boy?
That's a good episode title.
Wallet Boy was a customer who came in on a fairly regular basis. He had a reserve number in our system here. And on more than one occasion, he was a young guy. One of the few youths, who came through the store. Again, mostly we're talking, middle-aged guys. But on more than one occasion, this fellow forgot his wallet, either at home or in the car. But it happened to so many times that it was just like, what's going on here? And so we started calling him Wallet Boy.
And he definitely knew that we called him Wallet Boy because not only did we call it to his face, but he would come in, and the first thing we would say is we would look up and just drop everything we were doing and say, do you have your wallet today? Because if not, you should go check for it first. And I think he took a little offense to that eventually.
Maybe that's why he doesn't come in anymore.
Oops.
Was he trying to scam the store? Was it like, oh, hey, I forgot my money, I'll pay you next week?
He was always good about he would go out and he would come back and pay. Like he was always honorable, and he always paid for the merchandise. It was just this routine of, oh gosh, you get up to pay and be like, oh, where'd my wallet go? Let me run out to the car and then come back and be like, who would have thought that it was in the car? And after, one or two times, like, okay, yeah, maybe he's just forgetful, whatever. But by the 15th time, it's like, if you haven't caught on to the routine yet, that you get out of the car and can't seem to remember your wallet, we're going to make it very clear to you that you should turn around, get your wallet, and then please come back in and shop here, And I'm trying to think of the nickname. I don't even remember what this kid's nickname was. But another one of the youths we have, and I know his real name, and I won't say it because I don't want to take any offense to it. But we had a young kid who would shop here, who, like all of us, very passionate about the comics and would get them and would be so excited that he would just literally be drooling at times, being like his mouth would water. And
oh my God, I forgot all about this guy.
I don't remember his nickname, but I do know that on some occasions, when we were bagging his stuff, we would occasionally slip some salt packets or pepper packets that we would get from the deli next door in with his bag, because we always assumed that he was just going to go home and just devour, like Comic Eater or something like that.
Comic Eater was his nickname.
That Comic Eater was going to go home and just devour the book, and so we figured we would add a little flavor for him and give him those salt packets with it.
It's funny because when you were starting to tell that story, I was actually thinking of someone else. Do you remember the guy who reminded us of a serial killer? And he would be sweaty, because Comic Eater would come in and he would be breathless. He would breathlessly ask for the latest issue of whatever it was. But I feel like there was another guy who actually really was sweaty to the point. I mean, he would give us the books and they were wet.
I know exactly. I'm trying to picture him, but I know exactly who you're talking about, and it makes me think of the other guy, who I guess we just called OCD guy. But many of us, myself included, I think all of us have some level of OCD, and I think for me, it certainly comes out in my comic collecting. Ask anybody who wants to borrow a comic from mine, no matter how much I love you, you will not borrow a comic from mine. I've been horribly scarred from an experience in high school where a good friend of mine bent the cover of my book and gave it back to me and was totally unfazed by it. And after that, never again. But we have this one guy who was convinced, and we would argue about, how does he think that the comics get from the boxes onto the shelf? Because we were physically manning these books, but he would go around and he would pick his books off the shelf, and he would come up and he would refuse to let us touch them. He would fan them out in front of us, and he would say, I've got 3 at $2.99 and 1 at $3.99, and here's my money. And he would drop it from a height so that our hands never connected. We never touched his comics. We never touched his hand. When we had to give him change, we had to drop it again into his hand. And he would bag his own stuff and take it with him. So there was literally no exchange of any human contact, even remotely. And so I guess we just called him OCD guy.
Yeah, it was crazy. I mean, once again, as you were telling that story, I was thinking of another person who would spend, we didn't have a nickname for him. We'll call him G. He would spend, I mean, no joke, the entire afternoon once again going through every title and picking out that perfect copy. You know, there's that bit in Clerks with the milkmaids, and it was like that, but I mean, just to a whole other level. I mean, it was scary.
He would have these insane order forms that he would email Steve, and Steve would then, of course, order the books. And as Steve has made clear, some of the customers did not always follow through on their orders. They would order it, request it, and never show up to buy it. Even when we would call, usually my job or Anthony's job, not Steve's, to call them and say, hey, listen, come get your stuff. They still wouldn't show up. And so this guy, G, he was notorious for this and left us with a tremendous amount of merchandise that he just never came. And so Steve emailed him and said, listen, I'm done pulling for you. This is enough. Enough is enough. You've taken far too much advantage of the store. We're putting everything you've got here back out for sale, and you're done. We're finished. But month after month, an email would come, and he would have a whole nother list of requests. Never coming in, never buying anything. And this went on, I'm not even saying 1 or 2 months after. This went on for a good year or so. So I really don't think if we use his name, will he ever be like, those assholes are talking about me? Because he couldn't understand when Steve would send email after email after email, ultimately sending one that basically said, you know, what the F is wrong with you? Haven't you taken an effing hint? You know, you should not be sending me anything. I have not ordered anything for you in over a year. And I'm almost convinced that maybe even to this day, he's probably still getting emails from him, which would be awesome.
It would be so great. Oh, I'd give anything to see if that's the case and read some of them now.
Yeah, I just always hoped that I wasn't here when he one day showed up to murder everybody.
It is uncomfortable. That's maybe one of the behind the scene things, from my experience at least, is it is uncomfortable when somebody comes in and has not been told that they're dead, and was just under the assumption that their books would be here for them. And then they come in after a very long hiatus, and store policy would dictate that we were within our right to say, enough is enough, you're done. But they would come in and they would be very upset. Why is my stuff in the box on the floor? Why don't I have the last 3 months worth of books? Why did you stop pulling, you know? And then you'd have to sit there and explain to them, well, you know, you haven't been in 9 months, and we reached out to you and you never came, and you know that's why we stopped pulling. Well, I'm here now and I want my stuff. And it was always very uncomfortable at times.
Yeah, definitely. And sometimes it would manifest via the secret files within the computer system. So for those listening who might not know how it works here at Alternate Realities, every customer who has a file number with us, they're listed in our system here. And so when they come up and they give us their number, we type it in and we can pull up their purchase history, not the items, but the amount. And we keep track of those amounts. And every $100 that the customer spends, they get a $10 credit. But beneath the purchase history is a little text box where we can write notes. And those are, when I refer to Steve's secret files, that's how he uses that space. And the variety of information that's included in those files, it varies. We have one. I know what you're going to say though about when one of our customers became a man.
Yes. So there's that one. But I was going to.
We got to explain what that one is.
Yeah, I was gonna lead with it varies from the nice stuff of saying, well, when was his wedding anniversary? When was the birth of his kid? To things regarding the store, will not be able to come in for 2 months, keep pulling, or cancel the account, stop pulling, notes like that. But yeah, and then it does range all the way up to when people became a man.
Yes, referring, of course, to our young customers' bar mitzvah. But right, what would happen sometimes is someone would come up. Maybe their comics weren't banished to the floor, but they would come up. They would be ready to make their purchase and give us their number, and we'd pull them up and we'd see the note, dead. And it's like, yeah, you have to break the news to them of like, well, we had to cancel your file, and it could be awkward sometimes. I had forgotten about that.
One of the things that I always find funny though is for every customer that we have had dead, I would say it's fair to say close to half of them are still customers, and in fact their files have been reopened. But Steve, who never forgets, keeps the dead comment in there, and then we'll put, we're giving him a second chance. Maybe he won't screw us again, and some of these can even get pretty explicit where he'll be like, that fucking asshole left us with $150. If he ever comes back in, I want my money back, and it did leave us in that situation as you look at the secret file and you read it and you look up at the customer who's upset that his stuff's not there, and you think to yourself, I'm not getting paid enough to have to break it to this guy that he doesn't have the death of Superman in his file, or maybe a more important book.
And plus you owe us $150. So can you please pay?
Exactly.
I actually wanted to ask you, Mike. I think it's a great segue talking about again, some of Steve's comments and his attitude towards the customers. And again, much of our first episode of this podcast was about his closing announcement, in which he blamed the closing on those customers who left him in the lurch. To my knowledge, and correct me if I'm wrong, I don't believe you've ever been on the receiving end of his wrath. But I'm sure that you've witnessed it. You've seen it in various forms in the in the sign that says "Don't touch dumbass" and things along those lines. So I'm just curious, what has your take been on that?
Yeah, you're correct. I've never been the object of ire of Steve's infamous ire. But I've seen it. I've never seen a full-on dressing down of a customer. Someone who either did something, flat out wrong, or tried to do something that he would just get, go off on, thankfully. But I've heard him on the phone crush dreams, which is always fun. I hear some of the story you guys are saying, and it shocks me to think that people would walk in after not coming for 9 months, and that there'd be something for them, and that not only would there be something for them, but there'd be something for 9 months, or even a month of not coming in regularly. And that stuff would not only would be there exactly the way they expected, and okay, so maybe I'm a pretty OCD. I would want that, but once I got here and it wasn't, to get mad at people because of something that I was not doing, it shocks me. So I have always taken a kind of amused perspective on Steve's customer relationship.
One of the things that we do at the store is on Saturday nights, there was a tradition of closing up and then going out to eat. And it was usually whoever was left around, but it became a real family.
Mike, we've invited you to a number of dinners, and you have not made that jump. And I'll ask you why, but I can say, I was in that same position. They started asking me to dinner, as soon as I started working here as a high schooler, and I didn't go at first, and I think mostly it was out of shyness. I also didn't even drive yet at that point, so that probably had something to do with it. But I mean, I didn't really start accepting those invitations probably until I was in college, probably when you and I started hanging out, Sean, and we would go together. But yeah, I mean, I've always kind of been curious because we have extended invitations, and you've not made that. You've not made that. You want to have a little bit of a separation? Is that what it is?
No. I wish it was something like that simple. I mean, so I feel comfortable in this environment and with you guys, with the people here. But sometimes I feel, oh man, you're gonna have to cut this out.
I don't know. It sounds like we're going someplace good.
Yeah, this is like a session of mine. This is great.
So like I feel there's a lot of times I feel like I wear on people. At times that's been a concern of mine. So the distance I try to keep is more so that you guys always think of me as the fun, good person, and not those other times. So it's about me more than anything.
No, I mean I understand. It's funny. When I started working here, it was more than anything else, more than getting the books first or getting a discount or any of that stuff. As corny as it sounds, mostly I just loved being able to finally talk about this stuff because I'm an only child. None of my friends in school ever really were into comic books. And even, the online forums, I mean, this was late 90s, early 2000s. They were in their infancy. So I remember one day in particular, probably the first summer that I was working here, I chewed Steve's ear off all day. Basically, it was just like a comic info dump. It was like every opinion I had about anything, any question I had about anything, I mean, I just let it go. And I mean, bless his heart, he, indulged me. But
no 3-minute rule? Did Steve not institute that for you?
No. But so I mean, I think we, I'm glad that you felt comfortable to let it out to the extent that you have. I hope that you're always welcome to, to do so more, to join us. Now that the store is not going to be here.
Yeah, I'm going to have to, absolutely.
You're going to have to come to dinner.
Yes.
That's right.
This is I spend a lot of money here. I'm not gonna lie. This is where any of my disposable income goes. My wasted money, if you will, some people might say, would go to comics here. So part of the reason why it's gotten that way is because Steve's my friend, and I've always taken the approach that if I'm going to spend my money, I'm much happier spending it in a place where that's my friends, that's going to support my friend, his life, his business, his family. And it's always, this has always been money well spent in my eyes because of that. I get something out of it, and the person that I'm giving it to is someone that, I feel strongly about, supporting their life.
Yeah, that was something that you said to me recently that I thought was interesting. Because, right, I mean, as we mentioned before, customers here who have a file with us, essentially they get a 10% discount. They get a $10 credit for every $100 they spend. I know you could get a better deal elsewhere, especially online, but you do come here to do that. I mean, I don't know if I could think of any other place where I have done or would do something like that.
There's nowhere else. I mean, I like to think of myself as a really good customer generally when places I like, not just here but elsewhere. But there's, delis I like that I'll go to that are slightly more expensive than the one down the street, but because I like the people or the whatever, stuff like that I'm really drawn to. And I would not make that kind of decision about any place, but I'm happy making that decision about, here. I know why I, grew to really care about him beyond our interpersonal actions. Maybe the third or fourth year I started coming here, my sister and my parents came in separate trips to buy me presents for my birthday or something. And they both were like, he was so nice. Once we told him that we were here for you, it was like the red carpet. He was just totally nice, friendly. Made sure made sure that we got the deal. Made sure that it went on your account. He's like, they were great. They just raved about him. And I came in and I was like, oh man, thank you so much. And my parents told me they were here, and it was real nice. He was like, of course, you're my friend. Why wouldn't I treat your parents that way? And it was like, oh yeah. But I realized how that gruff personality hides this soft little teddy bear inside that really wants to come out, that wants to be that way towards people. And I think other customers who are not as inner circle as as those me or others who are on the podcast, and certainly you gentlemen who worked with them, I think they see how we all interact with each other, and that lets them look past some of the customer service style issues, I guess you could say, that arise.
What customer service style issues are you speaking
Well,
of?
no,
Mike?
I mean, like the Steve-ness that we're talking about, the letter, the
closing
the
announcement.
closing announcement, the signs, like that stuff. Some of that, I hearing some of people's comments against him. Yeah, okay, I could see people taking that approach, but that was just a raw, genuine statement from Steve. So if you've known him, he's made others in the positive, way too. So
One of the only times that I remember you and I arguing with Steve is when we were trying to get him to put out action figures for sale, and he was just not having it. Do you remember this?
Is this the "it's my money" argument?
Oh, that might have been a different argument,
Oh.
but maybe. Well, actually, no. I think you're
Yes,
right. Yeah.
no. I mean, there's a lot of stuff in this store, as Mike, you can certainly attest to. There's a tremendous amount of merchandise in this store, and I would say 75% of it's not even visible to the average customer. And part of when I first came into the store, and hearing conversations from Bill and Drew, of another former employee, Brandon, another former employee and owner, there was always this belief: move product around, put things in different spots, let things be visible, because when people do come in, they might notice it in a different spot and say, "Oh, wow, I never saw that before. I really want to buy that."
What are some of the tasks that are involved in working at a comic book store?
If you're doing the Wednesday, it's the breakdown. It's unpacking all the books. It's doing the counts, making sure that we have everything, that nothing's damaged. And each of us has a different grading of what we consider damaged.
Yes, and by that he means that very few books make it past the McInerney scale. I mean, I think a number of the other guys are a lot more forgiving. I mean, a book really has to be banged up for us to mark it as damaged and not put it out for sale. And I can definitely attest to the fact that Steve became a lot more lax with those standards as the store went on. Because I feel like when I first started working here, I was more mindful of that, because he would be more selective in terms of, whether a book was in good enough condition to be on the shelf. But I don't know.
Well, and you're right, because when I first started working, I remember that pressure of, as we're counting a book on a Wednesday, we'll stack them all up, and then you have to go through each one to check the cover front and back to make sure that it's in good condition. And at the time, we were ordering 150 copies of Spider-Man, or even more than that, 275 at one point we were ordering, I believe. So we're talking huge numbers that we're counting and looking at. And I remember when we would stack the piles for reservists that Steve would then put aside and put into the file folders. There's always that little twinge of anxiety of, is he going to come back and say, this one's damaged and you missed it? Or is he going to come back and say, there's supposed to be 55 and you only gave me 54, or you gave me 56 and now I don't know what to do and I've got to go back and do it all over again.
Yeah, I completely agree. That definitely was always a source of anxiety, because the Wednesday mornings, could often be tense.
I can imagine.
The system has changed a little bit now. In recent years, retailers have been able to pick up their books on Tuesday from UPS. So now Steve can come here on a Tuesday, the day he's closed, and take his time, bringing the boxes in, unloading. He can do a little bit on Tuesday, a little bit on Wednesday. But during the time when you and I were working the Wednesdays, he would pick the books up that morning, drive them here, unload, we'd unpack, we'd mark off to make sure that we received everything that we were supposed to, that things weren't damaged or missing.
And we opened earlier in those days. We opened much earlier in those days. Yeah. And so now we've got a nice window of a couple hours where we're not under that same time crunch. But before, I mean, you could see people lining up outside and looking and saying, oh no, we still have like 4 more titles to go through.
Yeah. And the way Steve's system works is he really does this all by hand, but he'll tally up ahead of time, how many copies of X book he needs for each customer. Mm-hmm. And so yeah, you would see that number that he needs, and you would count it very carefully, and bring him that pile. And yeah, you would hope. You're like, I really hope I didn't miss one, or I didn't give him an extra one, because that would not go over well. Because on his end, it would require going back through everyone who was supposed to get it to see if he missed somebody, if he gave them an extra copy. Yeah, the Wednesdays were definitely, could be tense, but also, it's the busiest day. It's the most fun. It goes the fastest.
There's the fun tasks that are not part of the job requirement unless you choose to make them, which is like pest control. There have been times where mice have been. This is a mouse haven. This is like the dream for every mouse because it's surrounded by perfect packing materials to make a home out of, and you're sandwiched in between a deli, a Mexican restaurant, and a Chinese restaurant. So this really is like the Garden of Eden for mice, and there are times where mice would be found dead. We have traps out, and then we would catch a mouse. One time, we inadvertently killed a mouse just by placing a bookcase where we placed it, and the crevice was so small that the mouse got stuck and literally starved to death and died and began decomposing behind this bookcase. And there was a big debate at that time as to, well, who's going to get rid of this mouse? And how are we going to do it? Because, little known fact, these bookcases, they're not only very big, but they're all bolted together in this really weird labyrinth of screws and everything like this. And at one point, Steve had the belief, it's going to decompose eventually. Yeah, it smells now, but we'll put some Glade or some air freshener out, and who's going to notice, And ultimately, it resulted in myself and Rich Roney coming in. I want to say we got here at like 8 a.m. on a Saturday, 3 hours before we open, and with tools to take the bookcase apart, take the mouse out, and then reassemble the bookcase back in its spot, mouse free.
Notice I'm usually not present for these
Yeah,
sorts
thanks a
of
lot.
jobs.
Thanks a lot, Anthony. There are a couple of my favorite jobs. My favorite job is I love grading books. I love when Steve buys collections and brings them in, and we price them. Again, there's some anxiety. Does Steve agree with my pricing? Does he agree with my rating of the book? Who's to say? And it's always hit or miss sometimes. I think we've gotten better. I think he and I see books much more similar in quality, and I'll often test him and I'll say, well, what do you think of this book? As a gauge for myself, and we have the CGC guide and we have all the lists and stuff, but there's still some subjectivity to it. So that's one of my favorite jobs. And my other favorite job was the doing returns. And doing a return with a comic book is so against my grain because I'm so anal about my comics and the condition that they're in, that when you do a return, you don't return the full comic, you just return the cover. So you have to sit there and tear the comic, the cover off of every single comic you're returning. And how cathartic is that for someone like me who is practically wearing gloves to read these books, to be able to just sit there and rip these things in half and throw them around. And I mean, that I still to this day, I love doing returns. My least favorite job, and the one that I always just bang my head against the table with, is when we had the dead, when somebody was considered dead, and our job was now to count up how many books, what title, what issue, and how much each issue was that this person left us with. And we literally cardboard after cardboard after cardboard of notes of, well, they had Avengers 57, Avengers 58. They left us with $300 in losses. I hated that because we did all that work, and then the books just sat there in the pile. Now they were alphabetized and organized, but they never really, not often, went back out on the shelf or anything like that. So they just were sort of a wasted opportunity. We have customers who don't read signs, and we have lots of signs up, so maybe they're not totally to blame. But it's currently like 9 o'clock at night as we're doing this, and there are people still banging on the door expecting to come in and buy books. There are times where it says very clearly we're closed on a Tuesday. It's a Tuesday night, mind you, no less, and they're still banging on the door saying, "But you're closed, but you're here." So.
Well, I think now would be a good time to maybe tell some of our favorite stories. There's one that I know you and I both find very amusing. It's probably the time that I laughed the hardest at the store. It was a Wednesday. You and I were working together. Again, as we've said, Wednesday is New Comic Book Day. It's the busiest day. So we had been open for a little while. You and I were behind the counter, Sean, and Steve was sitting on a chair, sort of in the entranceway. And in walks this customer who we had interacted with before. He was not a regular, but he came in from time to time. And he was harmless, but he would talk to himself. But again, it was perfectly fine. So anyway, he walks in and he goes up to Steve and he goes, "Anything new today?" Steve can have an attitude sometimes or sarcasm, but there really wasn't any of that in Steve's response. He just goes, "Well, it's Wednesday. There's always something new." And this guy goes, as cheerful as ever, as cheerful as he asked his initial question. He goes, "You're a bitch." I remember you and I just laughing so hard. I mean, that it still makes me laugh. The "you're a bitch" story.
That's definitely a great memory. One of my favorites is we have a customer who, most customers get a discount. They get the 10% off or whatever, and there are even some products that we discount even more for the customers that are really regulars and come in a lot and are buying stuff. And like we said, one of the items in the store that has a very high markup are the variant covers, and these are covers that for every 100 books we order, we get one copy of the cover, and the price for the book is much higher than it would be for any other regular cover. And we have this one customer in particular who Steve was giving a very generous deal to because he would buy these books in bulk. He would buy hundreds of dollars of these variant covers, so Steve was giving him a very nice discount. And what irked me is, Steve's a generous guy, and he's giving discounts to people, and he doesn't need to because this is his bread and butter, this is his lifeblood, and he's still discounting it for you. And then they'll come up and they'll say, "Well, can't you do any better?" And it would drive me nuts. And eventually, this one customer kept doing it and kept just driving me nuts. So finally, I said, "Listen, I really wish I could give you a discount, but if I do, Steve's going to spank me again, and I just don't want to get spanked." And I went on to explain to this customer that when Steve gets frustrated with us, he takes us in the back and bends us over his knee and spanks us like a child. And thankfully, my friends were in the store, and they picked up on it, and they would come by and say, "Yeah, no, Sean, we know what you got last time. We really don't want to see that happen again." And I'm convinced this customer left thinking, like, what the fuck goes on in this store? And what is Steve doing to his employees? That he's spanking them if they're out of line. But he stopped asking me for a bigger discount. I gave him a price, and he said, "You know what? Don't get spanked. Here's your money. Don't worry about it." So
Yeah, the haggling was probably one of my biggest pet peeves. And, on the one hand, I get it. I mean, we're not a chain, so you maybe feel more inclined to give it a shot. Sometimes it'd be frustrating and I would think to myself, well, you wouldn't go into Best Buy and, bring up a DVD and say, "Hey, I'll give you $10 for it." But, it would happen here. I think whether or not we were receptive to it depended on a lot of factors, on who the person was and the way they approached us and what the item was. But that definitely could be a pet peeve. Have you ever tried to negotiate a better price here? And if not, why not?
Partly that's because it's this whole my concept of me is the cost. Well, I went through this at Borders. I mean, you say that people wouldn't go up and say, "I'll give you $10 for the CD at Best Buy." This book has a crease in the upper corner. Can you give me a 10% discount on it? What do you mean, no? You have other books at 10% discount. Oh, I don't understand. Sir, that's a university press book. Borders actually pays about $2 less than the cost of that. They only buy it because they want to have the in-the-store selection. So, you're lucky that we have it at all and that you're able to get it. This was before, the days before Amazon. You couldn't get this in Westchester right now. But the corner is creased. It's not in perfect condition. Is your manager here? And you'd be like, seriously? You'd go through a lot. So I brought that experience into here, into what I would do here. So I would try to be pretty, whatever. And then over time, I mean, as he became my friend, it would be like, well, if that's what he's, pricing it as, I'm going to, that's good for me. And as Sean intimated, I would get deals periodically. I would get birthday. I mean, I got a birthday present. I get a birthday present every year. When around my birthday, I buy something. I get something for free.
As far as not paying attention, this actually is a funny story. We had a customer. I don't know if he comes in anymore, but he was a Wednesday regular for a while. He would always go straight to the incentive books that are on this counter right by the register, and he's a realtor or something along those lines, and we found his photo in some real estate magazine, and just to see if he was paying attention, that one Wednesday we put the magazine on top of the incentive books, open to the page with his picture, And he came in, no joke, went straight to the incentives, moved the magazine over, and started going through the incentives, not even realizing the picture of himself was right in front of him. So it is what it is. But I'm trying to. Are there any other pet peeves? I mean, one of mine. I will say this, and then I'll toss it to you. The comic books on the new wall are organized alphabetically, mostly. For whatever reason, Steve thought it would make sense to keep all of the X-Men books at the end of the alphabet. So it's A to Z and then the X-Men books. Mm-hmm. Other than that, it really is alphabetical. And despite this, I mean, I've lost track of how many times someone would come up and ask for a title, and we would tell them, oh, it's alphabetical, and they would not be able to find it.
That extends beyond just the books on the wall, the new books. Our graphic novel selection, it's all alphabetical. Alphabetical by company, by Marvel and by DC and by Image and Independence. And that is a question. It's always, well, where can I find Batman? Well, right before, Captain America and right after Aquaman, he's the B book, so follow the alphabet. That said, there is like a weird alphabet, and you touched upon it. The X books come at the end, but there are also books. Very recently, a book called Black Vortex. It was a storyline running through some of the X-Men and Guardians of the Galaxy titles. It was down under the X-Men books. It was, because it was an X-Men story, X-Men Black Vortex, but it was also up under B. And when one of the new tags depleted, there was a question of, well, what book goes here? Well, we don't know. And we look at the order form and we say, gosh, I don't know. I don't see anything that begins with B on the order form. What could it be? Oh, well, it was X-Men Black Vortex. That's why we couldn't find it. That's what was there. So there is a slightly skewed alphabet in some respects, but it is pretty simple to figure out, I think. And the fact that most of our clientele are older, educated, working professionals that come here. We're not talking the 5-year-olds, 6-year-olds, where you would be patient and say, I understand, I'll help you get it. We're talking, lawyer. I mean, we're in Scarsdale. We're talking lawyers, doctors, coming in and saying, I don't understand. Where's Wonder Woman? Well, it's under W. Well, where's W? Well, at the end of the alphabet. So that's definitely a pet peeve. And I think one of the fun little side notes about the store and the employees of the store is this, local business employs some of what I think are some of the highest educated, retail people in the county. Steve has his law degree. Anthony, you've got your law degree. Bill Mayo has a doctorate in chemistry. I've got a doctorate in psychology.
Steve Ryan
has a master's in computers, and
Tom has a master's in education.
So we've got graduate level employees here that all have lives outside the store for the most part, and yet all still come back to work at the store, and there's a reason for that. And I love that this store cultivates that that type of employee.
Much like actors on a television show that's ending, are there any things in the store that you guys would want to grab before it's all over?
I'd love that Rocketeer. I think that's a Dave Stevens drawing up there.
Make us an offer. The memento that I have from the store, and this sounds incredibly silly, and I know my wife is going to be very disappointed. In my portfolio, where most people would put original art or sketches from artists from Comic-Cons and stuff like that, I have 3 pages, one for each store bag. I've got the Green Lanterns bag, I've got the Batman bag, and I got the Superman bag. And it's a really silly, worthless memento to hold on to. But I look at them and I really do see the eras and generations of the store. And there are memories associated with each bag that I look at. So I've kept those. Those I'm really proud to say I have. And I know in talking with Steve, he does not have the Green Lantern bag. And he's got some Batman still, but no Green Lanterns. Green Lanterns are very tough to find. So AR fans, if you have any, hold on to them. They are nice relics. So
yeah, that is a great collectible. I only have the Superman bag because I just thought of it when he after he announced the store closing like that day. I was like, yeah, I got to keep a couple of these. I'm not going to have them anymore,
Fun fact, in addition to storing a customer's recent purchases, we also use the AR bag as gift wrapping. Yeah, so I definitely want to grab a stack of those, and yeah, I guess keep a couple as a memento, but also continue to have wrapping paper.
Exactly. And I think another thing that I'll hope to keep, and this was a few years ago, maybe even 5, 6, 7 years ago, for the holidays, I went out to the grocery store next to us in the shopping mall, and I bought a bunch of Christmas stockings for $1 or $2 a piece, whatever, cheap stockings or whatever. And then I bought those little sparkly markers and stuff, the glue markers, and I hung Christmas stockings up throughout the store for all the different people that worked at the store at the time. And there were many. It was actually mostly the people that went out for dinner at the time. And there's got to be 13, 14, or 15 of these stockings at this point.
You included a lot of people in there.
I'd like to take those back with me.
So I want to go back to your personal collection for a second. There's a segment in my comic shop documentary that features various customers and their man caves, and in that segment, I interviewed you and your wife together, and you talked about your aspirations for your own man cave. Now it's been a little while since we filmed that, so for those out there who have seen the movie and were wondering if you ever got that man cave, what can you tell them?
Well, I could tell them I'm very pleased to say that I do have a man cave. It's one that I really do value. When my wife and I were looking for houses, we had a conversation about my collection. And I've got a sizable collection. And the debate came down to, well, where are we going to store it? And I was adamant, well, it's not going in a basement, and it's not going in an attic. So it either gets its own man cave, presumably a bedroom, or it's going to be scattered throughout the home. Pictures hanging in the living room and dining room or whatever. And my wife, thankfully, and I'm very blessed to say this, said, okay, well, when we're shopping for a house, we will find a house, and you can have the smallest bedroom in the house. And we were of the good fortune to be able to buy a home that has 4 bedrooms, and I took the smallest bedroom, and it stores, I would say, 75% of my collection. The rest, thankfully, can stay at my parents'. I have a closet there with about 3,000 or 4,000 comics in it, but the other 6,000 or 7,000 are still in my room.
I have to ask, and if I can get your wife to come on and do our episode of the podcast. All right. Sean's trying.
It's a struggle. I'm trying. She was a good sport. She was in the movie. Now we got 2 kids, and the last thing she wants is to spend 3 hours away from them at night.
I mean, I certainly understand. But right, so we're doing this upcoming episode. It's called Wednesday Widows, and it'll feature some of the significant others of the male AR community members. So yeah, we'll keep working on that. Hopefully we can get her on there. But in the meantime, I'll ask you, because I have to say, for the various times that I screened the documentary and then I put it online and got responses, one thing that did seem to make an impression was, your interaction with your wife in the movie, specifically where she says that she thinks you should not buy and collect comic books. So, I mean, you sort of got to respond to it in the movie, but I guess I just wanted to give you an opportunity to just address that.
So I think it's not necessarily that I should not buy and collect comic books. I think it's more I should not be so preoccupied by the hobby. And my hobby, and I'll be the first to say it is certainly excessive. And there are better ways with a young family for me to invest money. And I'm blessed to be able to have some, fun money around. Like you were saying, Mike, this is where my extra money that I don't need to put in savings or whatever, or I can afford to not have to put in savings. This is where it goes. It goes into this hobby. And I always make the argument with her, well, I could be spending it, going out all the time with friends, drinking, or, having, going to strip clubs or smoking cigarettes or anything like that. I could put money that way, or even drinking coffee every day from Starbucks. I could spend my money that way. But I would rather, take that $5 and instead of buying a latte, I'd rather buy a couple books a couple comic books to hold on to in the long run. So I think that's where her pet peeve comes in. It's that, I'm locked into Wednesdays. I think comics are like drugs, and I think comic book collectors and the customers, myself included, are drug addicts. And I show up every Wednesday looking for my fix, and we have lines out the door before we're even open of people who need that weekly fix, and they want it before it gets, with the internet now, everything, all the information's accessible. They want it before the spoilers hit the internet. They want it. They want to hold it in their hand. I mean, Mike, you come from work during your lunch to get that book. So I think that's the part that she doesn't like, is that I'm locked into it, and that when we go on vacation, I'm always I'm texting or emailing the store to make sure that my stuff that I want is pulled aside from me. Partly because it's not always pulled aside from me, Steve. Thanks a lot. I'm an employee of 10 plus years, and you still don't always pull everything I want. But also because I'm so OCD that I want to make sure I have what I have, and so I appreciate that she does maybe not look super favorably on it. And if you saw the man cave today, you would. It's overwhelming. There's a lot of stuff to it.
Thank you to both of you for sharing your comic shop history. Before we wrap up, is there anything else that either of you would like to say? Anything we didn't get to that you wanted to?
I want to say thanks to you, Ant, for doing this, and for the original, for the movie. In a lot of ways, this place was special to me, but I didn't realize how special it was until you started doing these things and kind of codifying it, kind of making it something I could look at outside of my everyday, my experience of coming here, and I really appreciate that. So so the last thing I wanted to say is, if you are listening to this, buddy, I really want to say thank you for giving me a place that I felt comfortable coming to, a place that I looked forward to coming to, and a place where other people look forward coming to, and a place that really had a lot of spirit, a lot of life, a lot of energy, and a lot of love. And it's so rare that I really hope you are so proud of yourself for having made this place something special, and enabled other people to also feel how special it was, and to make it special themselves. So thanks, bud. This place has been great, and I will never forget you.
And just to close out too, I hope that the customers of the store listen to this, and I hope that they realize how much I truly appreciate and feel blessed to have been able to be a part of their lives in an ever so small a way.
Well, thank you both for the kind words and for participating in this episode. It's really been a pleasure speaking to both of you, and obviously an even bigger honor, getting to know both of you through the store over all of these years. So thank you to both of you. And to those who have listened to this episode, thank you very much. I hope you'll continue to tune in for future episodes of My Comic Shop History. Until then, don't be a flat squirrel.